Everyone. Thank you for joining us for this latest edition of Gateway's Rural Health Lecture Series. Today's discussion centers on Huron County's food landscape. I'm Nancy Simpson, Secretary of the Board of Directors at Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health. Gateway is located in Goderich and, to our knowledge, is the only rural health research center in Canada governed by community-based volunteers. Partnered with several academic centers and healthcare facilities, Gateway aims to advance rural health teaching and research across Huron, Perth, Bruce, and Grey counties. Our mission is to improve the health and quality of life of rural residents through research, education, and communication. Gateway launched this virtual lecture series in February of 2021. With social isolation being top of mind as COVID-19 restrictions continued to heighten, there was no better time to launch this initiative. Through this lecture series, our hope is to promote a culture of rural health knowledge and innovation, while virtually connecting individuals and communities. Let's take a moment to meet today's presenters, who will provide an in-depth conversation in regard to the topic, Great Local Food. Grace Bonnett and Sam Murray are both local to Huron County. They first became involved with Gateway as summer students a few years ago. Grace and Sam are now working to advance the progress of important research projects currently underway. Joining Sam and Grace today as panelists are Lauzon. He's Gateway's Chair of Rural Change and Development and a professor with the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development at the University of Guelph. Marty is Huron-Perth Regional Manager with Libro Credit Union. The research project being discussed today is a partnership between Gateway and Libro Credit Union, which has generously provided funding through their local food accessibility pillar aimed at growing prosperity within southwestern Ontario. Representing local producers, we're pleased to welcome John Moylan. He is an owner and operator of a mixed farming operation near Seaforth. John and Sarah, along with their 4 daughters, have aptly named their business 5 Chicks and a Farmer. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, and I'll turn it over to you, Grace and Sam.
Right, thank you, Nancy, for that introduction, and thank you everybody who's joined us today. I'm just going to share my screen here so we can get the presentation underway. All right, if I could just maybe get a nod or a thumbs up that everybody can see that. Perfect. Okay, so like Nancy said, my name's Sam Murray, and I'm here with Grace Bonnett today, and we're presenting on Gateway and Libro's project titled Great Local Food, which is exploring Huron County's food landscape. And just to get us started off here, we have a quote that it is ironic that some people living amongst some of the most productive agricultural land in the world are challenged to access healthy food, especially if they have limited transportation, and perhaps locally produced food is a means of mitigating some of that need. This is a quote from Lauzon, who Nancy introduced, and you'll be hearing from later during the panelist discussion. But it really just gets to the heart of part of this project, which is that with so much food available within Huron County, we want to make sure that the food being produced here is having as much of an impact within our community as possible. And so just a little bit of a project overview and explaining the sort of reasoning behind the name GR.E.A.T. So GR.E.A.T is actually an acronym which stands for Growing, Raising, Eating, Accessible, and Thriving Local Food. And it really does a good job at representing what we're working towards with this project, which is the promotion of people who are both growing and raising local food, trying to increase the number of people who are eating local food, making sure that that local food is accessible to everyone, to overall support a thriving local food system within Huron County. And then on top of that, we also just think that the local food that we have here is pretty darn great as well. So it works both ways. And our research team, Grace will go over everybody that's been involved.
Yeah, so I will go over the research team for the Great Local Food Project. So as Nancy already introduced, we have Al Lauzon. He is the research chair for this project and also Gateway's chair of rural change and development. And Al is also a professor at the University of Guelph in the School of Environment and Design and Rural Development. Leslie Walker is the research associate for the project. Leslie joined Gateway at the end of 2020 and has played a pivotal role in developing foundational components of this project. Her background in consulting has been a major benefit to the metrics-based approach that we have taken for this project. And Sam and I are the research assistants. So we conducted the producer interviews and have created educational resources for the first phase of the project, which took place last summer. Both Sam and I have educational backgrounds in science and have worked with Gateway in the past. So we've really appreciated shifting our focus to a more community-based research project that allows us to benefit our local community in which we were both raised. So all three of us, Leslie, Sam, and myself, we all actually grew up in Huron County and have gone back to school and returned to Huron County to start to pursue our careers. So I'll go over the project aim. This is a very high level description of phase one of the project. So a quote here from Marty Robs, results of the study will lead to concrete and measurable solutions on how to close food accessibility gaps and will provide a template for other like-minded organizations in other regions to complete similar studies. So for this project, our first step was to identify the gaps within our local food system, which we started last summer from the producer's perspective, and will continue on this summer in the second phase from the consumer's perspective. So some potential gaps include production, marketing, competition versus community, consumer reach, and operating costs. Next, we identified potential measures that will target and mitigate these gaps as identified by the producers and consumers. So this includes consumer education, increased transportation services, the creation of food hubs, and potential updates to policy. And finally, our overall goal for the project is to create a knowledge translation strategy throughout the community by developing educational posters, increasing advertising, increasing communication with regulators, determining best practices, and creating a project template. So now I'll go over the rationale of the project. So why this project is important and why it is of value to our local rural community. So what is the so what? So beyond the acquisition of data and creating a knowledge translation strategy throughout the community, this project really has the potential to holistically benefit many members of our community. So we have identified 4 main areas that the project will potentially have an impact on, all of which are interconnected and play a major role in people's lives. So I'll take a bit of a deeper dive into this. So local food can positively impact health, economy, community, and environment. So we all know agriculture plays a major role in Huron County's economy, and a thriving local food system can further benefit this. In terms of health, obviously, we know what we eat impacts our health, and local food has the potential to provide people with a nutritious and nutrient-rich diet. In terms of community, a thriving local food system can increase social cohesion and sense of belonging to ultimately expand the community's capacity. And lastly, environment. So with reduced transportation and increased sustainability of local food, local food has the potential to pose fewer detrimental impacts on the environment. So these benefits are specifically tailored to small scale farming as opposed to large scale industrial farms. So we believe that this can resonate with many members of the community and positively impact the uptake of the project. And these concepts, now that we have completed phase 1, we've realized that they do align with the themes we identified from the producer interviews. And I will go into a bit more detail on this in a little bit.
All right, so that does a good job of talking about sort of local food during everyday life. But obviously we are living in, the word unprecedented. I feel like that's been thrown out a lot recently, but we are living in unprecedented times. And we really do feel that COVID-19 has primed people to want to support local food in a very unique way, as it's convenient, it's safe, and it helps support their local economy. So the three main things that we highlight here are the food security aspect. So building stronger local food networks. It allows communities to be less reliant on global supply chains, and that helps during a pandemic as it highlights the benefits of increased food sovereignty. So for example, if you think back to the early days of the pandemic when we had the flour shortages or things like that, it was sort of people watching in real time the susceptibility of global trade systems when it comes to getting people food. And even just on a more local scale, local food does provide an alternative method of getting your food, which may help ease some people's anxieties with shopping in more populous like grocery stores or things like that. And then also economic recovery. Of course, pandemic has had a large toll on the finances of a lot of people, and that includes local food. However, local food can help bring back or spur economic activity within our community as a whole, as it keeps more money circulating within our community. And then health and wellness, of course, is top of mind for everybody right now. And like Grace mentioned, local food has the ability to support people's physical health through nutrition, as well as their mental health through community building. And these three things really prime people to be ready to hear about local food, and it's what gets us at Gateway very excited for this project. So now looking a little bit more at the process and the progress of the project. So just to start with a high level overview of what we're planning on doing and what we have done. So in year one, which started last summer, we completed a literature review. So just looking at what was out there in the academic spheres, talking about local food systems, benefits, areas of improvement, things like that. And then also the interviews that we conducted with producers to make sure that we were getting as local of data as possible, because we really wanted to make sure that this project was informed by the people that were operating within this space on a daily level. And from that, we were able to create some educational tools to implement that knowledge translation that Grace was talking about, which we'll dive into those a little bit more later. And then year two, we're going to be going into the consumer side of things. So we'll be having surveys sent out around the community. So assuming that the people listening to the lecture today are likely interested in local food. So please keep your eyes peeled for those. We've posted them on the Gateway website as well as Gateway socials and within the community as well. And from that, we'll be able to analyze the data that we've gathered and create a final research document that goes over the things that we've learned, potential recommendations that we have for people to really create that thriving local food system within Huron County. So phase one specifically, we went through 3 steps. We located and profiled the food producers that we have in Huron County. We consolidated the data for the local producers, and we created those educational resources for consumers. The locating them kind of came from that, you don't know what you need until you know what you have. So we included both primary and secondary food producers in Huron County, as well as data on accessibility. So it helped us see visually where people were producing and selling food to help identify any potential, food deserts that we have within the county. And consolidating the data really helped us receive information from the producers to make sure that we were basing all of our actions on that. And then the educational resources, like I said, we'll talk about that a bit more later on, so I won't go too much into that. But overall, the goal of phase one was to really find the producers that we have while simultaneously educating consumers and creating those end deliverables that are both practical and relevant to the people of Huron County.
So in terms of project reach so far for the producers in phase 1, we identified a total of 57 producers. And as you can see here, there's a diverse spread across each sector. So we were able to locate and profile each of these producers, add them to our contact list, as well as our map, which, as Sam mentioned, we will be showing later on. So far, the feedback we've received for the project has been very positive, and we're happy with our results, but we do hope to continue hearing more perspectives from both the producers and consumers. And yeah, as you can see from this here, this really highlights the diversity of what we have available in Huron County and within our local food systems. So. There we go. So through our producer interviews from phase 1, we identified 4 main themes pertaining to Huron County's local food network. So first, economics. So we can't deny the fact that many things in life come down to the dollar value. And although this can be a burden in terms of purchasing local food, there is significant value in investing in our local community. So by purchasing locally grown food, the dollar value recirculates and exponentially multiplies throughout our community. This is especially crucial to rebuild the local economy following the pandemic, as Sam referred to earlier. And supporting the local food economy also helps to expand the job market and support future generations and promote youth to stay rural, which is a large focus for Gateway as well. And finally, the increased freshness and value of local food not only tastes better, but it allows you to save money through less food waste and conscious eating. So it's really a win-win. And also there's a strong culture associated with local food. So eating food close to home that follows the natural progression of the seasons fosters this unique connection to community. And this connection is strengthened by the sense of security local food offers by bypassing complex global supply chains. As we have seen, those can break down pretty easily. And furthermore, the vast bounty available in Huron County's local food offers the possibility of exploring new and exciting food products, which can be prepared and preserved in various different ways. And yeah, engaging with local food systems can help you be a part of this culture and continue to pass it on through to future generations. So nutrition is another theme that we identified through the producer interviews, and there are various aspects pertaining to how our local food contributes to increased nutritional value and ultimately to benefit the health and well-being of the consumers. So the increased diversity of what's available in local food systems allows us to eat a balanced diet. So whether it's a mainstay like your fruits and vegetables or delicious maple treat every once in a while, there's so much diversity just right here within Huron County. And as well, fresher foods are more nutrient dense and require less preservatives and less processing. And lastly, local food does not have to travel as far to reach your plate, thus reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the individual carbon footprint through lower transportation pollutants. So also by encouraging sustainable agricultural practices, local food can benefit the surrounding flora and fauna to promote biodiversity as well as land preservation. And in terms of food waste, with over 60% of Ontario's food waste reaching landfills, thus increasing methane production, the freshness and quality local food has to offer can contribute to a reduction in this food waste. So from this information that we identified from the interviews, we wanted to ensure that we take it and use it in the best way possible. So Sam will now go over our communication strategy with the community.
Yeah, so communications, like Grace said, is super important, particularly because through the interviews with producers, we also identified that a lot of local food producers are just really busy people. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to be able to bring local food to market. And often that leaves little time for things like communications. So this was an area that Gateway was excited to sort of help try and fill through this project. by increasing that educational component within the community. So what we plan on doing in this next phase of the project is distributing a diverse mix of media to reach as many demographics as possible and really show consumers what's in it for them when it comes to purchasing local food. And we plan to do this through the use of posters, which will be sort of more like eye-catching general slogans just to increase general awareness within the community, through social media, which will have a diverse mix of, more in-depth resources as well as more, quick glance resources. And they're also lasting. So things like our website that people will be able to visit at any time that conveniences them. And then also a brochure, which will reach people where they're at within the community and let them interact with the information on their own time. So just to go over each of these in a little bit more detail, we have our Gateway website, which does focus on the Great Local Food Project. It has a page dedicated to it, which goes over just, the history of the project, how it came to be, things that we've talked about at the beginning of the presentation here. And then also it has resources such as the map of our local food producers that we've been able to profile. So just to pause on this slide for a moment, you can see the map on the left here really shows a good visual representation of what Grace was talking about earlier, about that diversity of what we have in Huron County. And we are really so lucky to have that. So we want to make sure that we are fostering that and supporting that to make sure that we have it sustained into the future. So if you look at the map here, you can see there's fruits and vegetable producers with that green leafy icon. The red barn icon is meat and dairy producers. That blue glass icon is beverage producers, which includes things like breweries, wineries, as well as local juice companies. And then we also have specialty products, which is the orange bag icon. Those are things like add value products from things that have been a bit more like extra work has been put into them. And we also included local food retailers, which specialize in distributing local food from different sources to the community. So if you go on the website and you see the map, you're actually able to interact with the icons here. You can click on them, see what's near you, explore a new local food producer that you might not have known about, or you might not have just thought about interacting with. It usually gives you, their address, maybe a website or a phone number, something that will give you enough information to get in touch. We also want to be able to do producer highlights. So this is just an example slide, but things like, showing people farms, having pictures of different producers in the area, maybe a little blurb about their history, really strengthening that connection piece and the culture around local food. And we also included further readings on the benefits of local food. So this is for the people that want to go, above and beyond, look at the more broad topic of local food, really, get their hands dirty on the topic. And then also with the brochure that we mentioned, it goes over the 4 topics Grace was talking about those main themes we identified, being economics, nutrition, culture, and environment. We plan to have this distributed within different points in the community to increase awareness and let people take this home and read through the information, really soak it in on their own time. And it also does point to the Gateway website as well for those lasting resources. So looking forward into phase 2 of the project, we are excited to continue taking the project forward and switching to the consumer side of things a little bit more. So we want to include consumer surveys, hearing from people in the community like yourself who interact with local food, or maybe who haven't interacted with local food in the past but are interested in getting involved. We want to hear all sides and all perspectives of things that either draw people to local food, or maybe things that people see as barriers to local food. And we're also going to be following up with producers. So following up with the ones that we've talked to already, as well as those that we are still hoping to make a connection with in our community, to, again, get as many perspectives and as many voices heard as possible. And then continue to create more educational resources for consumers, boost awareness within our community, and also have communication via social media in a variety of different ways. So whether it's a video series going over producers, or even just going over ways to utilize different local food. These are all things that we're excited to explore as we transition into stage 2 of the project this summer. And then just to wrap up, we do have a quote here from Norman Borlaug, who's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. who says the first essential component of social justice is adequate food. And this really just highlights the importance of local food as it does intersect with so many different aspects of people's lives. And we're really excited to begin seeing the impact that this project can have on our community. And hopefully we see local food helping to ensure more people have access to adequate food, as it really is so needed. So through the work of this project and the works that it has the ability to inspire, Gateway and Libro will truly be making a positive change in the lives of Huron County residents and hopefully people in other rural areas as well. So now we're going to transition things into the panelist discussion. So we're going to open it up with a topic that Grace will introduce here. And as we are doing this, we are going to be monitoring the Q&A section of the webinar as well. So if you have a question that pops up, feel free to throw it in there. We're going to go through a panelist discussion and then we'll try and get to some questions at the end as well.
Yeah, so Gateway definitely has a deep commitment to rural health, and we see local food as a strong contributor to overall health. So projects such as this act as a first step by gathering and sharing relevant information. The next step is to find different ways to grow prosperity within local food systems. So this is where we're going to open up the discussion to our panelists. We're hoping each of you could touch on how we can grow prosperity within our local food systems as it pertains to each of your individual areas of expertise. So maybe we'll start with Al. How do you see strong local food systems benefiting communities as a whole?
Yeah, well, I think you and Sam, can you hear me okay, Grace?
Yep.
Okay, so I think you and Sam probably touched on some of the things that I would say in terms of providing a secure food supply, which is incredibly important to people, particularly given the increasing vulnerabilities of the global food system. So, you know, whether that is through global climate change, whether it's through political disruption, whether it's through issues of transportation and value chain. So it gives some sense of control, which actually provides some stability. People need nutritious food. Local food, as you noted, is tends to be more nutritionally dense. And I think one of the interesting things, particularly about this project and local food in general, is it tends to develop networks, and networks are a form of social capital and social cohesion. So it builds relationships of trust, and those relationships of trust then can be a source of mobilizing community resources for other sort of social needs or food needs. And typically it's better for the environment. Local food tends to engage in more sustainable practices, as you noted, has less of a carbon footprint. So all those things contribute to the well-being of the community. So like I say, you and Sam covered off a lot of those issues in your presentation, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's great to hear your perspective on it as well. So John, maybe we'll turn it to you if you want to touch on your experiences operating a local food business. So do you want to touch on your experiences with that and your transition back to farming from what you were doing prior to that?
Yeah, sure. That's it's been a journey. We've been at it for about 5 years now. And really, as we got into it, what we're doing now, it looks a lot different than it would have if we had started at it, say, 15 years ago, just because of the learning we did in that time and seeing the opportunities that were coming about due to the local food movement and also just the changes that have been happening in the farming practices themselves as people are becoming more knowledgeable about regenerative farming practices and ways to make that all more viable. Yeah, as far as hard things that or challenges we've had along the way, things like distribution. Well, getting our products to customers has always been a challenge for the local food because we don't have the big infrastructure that the commercial food systems have. So that involves delivery, trucking, cold storage, things like that, or even local processing of various kinds. In our business, it's meat processing, which has been limited or in short supply, especially as things have grown. So it's things like that that we've dealt with and tried to overcome. Yeah, that's kind of been the experience, and things have changed a lot even in the time we've been doing it. One of the main challenges starting out is, of course, having reliable sales volume. That has come a long way in the meantime through various means. Our social media has been a big part of that, of our promotion, and just the general awareness of and the demand for local food has really grown in that time. So it's helped on that side of it. Yeah, and just the distribution, the processing is coming along too.
Yeah, that's fantastic, John. I just want to, you touched on sort of like the meat processing side of things, and that's something that we've actually heard from a few different producers that we've interviewed. So I just want to say, if anybody's listening, just going to plug this. If you're looking for a way to get into the local food space and you're thinking about, maybe being an abattoir or like a meat processor, there's definitely a need for it in Huron County. So if somebody's on that's thinking about it or knows somebody that might be thinking about it, that would be a good spot to jump in.
Yeah, definitely that's the case on that side. As well as then another comment on that aspect is if there's anything, or if we can put, or if we have a voice that we can put forward, it would be on the regulation side of that as well. What I hear from our processors is they feel that a lot of the regulations that they're dealing with are meant for larger plants, don't necessarily suit them, and that would be a topic of discussion as well.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear as well. I think maybe, yeah, the uniqueness of local food requires unique policy around it too in some cases. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So Marty, we'll turn it over to you. Obviously, Libro has shown a very strong support of local food, and that's demonstrated through your commitment to projects such as this. Did you want to maybe speak to where that commitment comes from and why Libro sees local food as something worth putting resources towards?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Grace. So Libro exists to grow prosperity in our community. And we talk about prosperity. We talk about prosperity for individuals, prospect for our businesses, because if the individuals and businesses are prosperous, then our community is as well. But there are always barriers and challenges for people to get there. So local food accessibility, I think, is one example of looking at some of the root causes of where some of these barriers are. This is something where I think local food accessibility and accessibility to healthy food, people talk about it, but I think people assume that somebody else is going to look after it. And it's something that I think we feel very strongly needs to get a lot more attention. I like to use the analogy of a puzzle, and there's always so many pieces to a puzzle, and as our world gets more complex, that puzzle gets more pieces all the time. And where food accessibility comes in, just as an example, we all know that our students and our young people, they need healthy food to achieve their full potential, which includes the ability to learn. We know we have some major workforce issues in Huron County. I think we definitely want to ensure that our young people are learning as best as they can in their early years, to ensure that they have the skills necessary, whether it's a trade or whatever it might be, just so that we can properly train them for the needs in the county and in the region further down the road. So it's just one example, I say, but again, this is a big piece of many puzzles.
Yeah, definitely. Did you want to maybe speak to kind of the multiplier effect that we referred to in the presentation, if you have any
Sure.
input on that?
Yeah, and I think it's already been mentioned before. Like, I think one of the real shames is that even though Huron County is one of the prime agriculture areas of Ontario, access to that healthy food at an affordable price, it's really unavailable to a large segment of the population. And what we've seen over the last number of years is a larger number of niche producers out there. And when I say a niche producer, my definition, those are farmers, they're not into the intensive livestock production or in the familiar like wheat, corn, and soybeans. We're seeing a lot of different products coming out. So how do you make that connection between the niche producers and the end users? Because there definitely is a market for these products, but as your study will probably show, there's just a lot of challenges in getting that food to the people who want it and the people who need it. A big part of that is the education. You know, a lot of our small towns is just the one grocery store, and are people aware of what is available, you know, just out there in the countryside? And the closer we can keep that food to the end consumer, it helps keeps it as fresh and definitely healthier as possible. And by creating that consistent demand and a reliable supply chain, you know, John kind of alluded to that. If we can do that, that'll result in momentum being gained and keep the money circulating locally.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are fantastic points. And one of the other things that we wanted to talk about today was that sort of public perception and messaging, like that connection piece between those producers and the general consumer that you're talking about. And John, I was wondering yourself, I think you may consider yourself one of those, you know, quote unquote niche producers, raising specialty livestock. Would you maybe want to talk to your experiences with that?
Yeah, I was going to chime in. Something both Al and Marty said was the relationships and the networks. It's such a huge part of making it all happen from our end. And I think the more we keep that local, or the more we build that locally, it has so many other benefits as well as the practical side, like building the communities. And as Marty said, I feel one of the other things that's kind of a shame to see is we often, or a lot of young people leave the area for opportunities elsewhere. And the more of this stuff we can make happen locally, I would say, you know, there's probably opportunities for processing of different kinds too, food processing and whatnot, that will create more of those jobs here and be more likely to keep here.
Yeah, and not to put you too much on the spot here, but is there any one aspect of your business that you have seen greater success in reaching consumers, like an avenue of sale or something like that, perhaps? Or, you know, maybe something that you thought would be very promising, but there was some kind of barrier there that we could work towards getting rid of?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's been a success, we've seen it in other areas as well, like people want convenience. They want to order something and have it show up at their door type thing. And so we've been able to grow that a little bit. We've seen a pretty good benefit to our business once we started offering regular delivery. But as far as growing that, the collaboration with other producers as well as distributors, there's one in Huron County called Eat Local Huron. That's gone a long way to get over that convenience hump. You know, because otherwise people are more likely, they're going to get everything at the grocery store, right? And which is fine too. But if we're trying to promote the products that we're producing here that we feel are of a high quality, getting over that convenience hump has been and is a big thing for us. So that comes down to, yeah, I think fostering those networks in a lot of ways, whether it be something like Eat Local Huron or the other ways of providing deliveries, logistics type stuff. Like, as I think I mentioned, I've had a hard time in the past finding cold storage facilities when I need, like sometimes I need some overflow space, and or even ways to facilitate shipment and delivery of product in a efficient manner. That's a challenge as well.
Yeah. I think convenience is definitely a very important thing. And you mentioned Eat Local Huron, so I'll just do a little plug for them as well here. If anybody listening either hasn't heard of them or has maybe heard rumblings but hasn't checked them out yet, it is a fantastic website. You should go check them out. It's a delivery service. They have local producers sort of all together in one area, and they will deliver it to you. Or do they have a pickup as well? Do you know, John?
As far as I know, everything is delivered on their truck.
Yeah. So it's a really convenient way to get local food if somebody is interested in looking.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of that are their aims is to provide everything in one place. So you play or as many things as possible. So it helps people that way.
Absolutely. And also with that, if you haven't looked into your local farmers market, I think a lot of them are also doing delivery now as well, which was a transition that happened during the pandemic. So that's another thing for people to check out. I think we're just going to hop over to the Q&A for a second. There's a few questions coming in. I don't want to leave people behind here. So Karen asked, home gardens are also a factor in local foods. Any data? Karen, that's a fantastic question. And they definitely are a factor in local food. I think it really speaks to the culture of local food as well. Mainly like those generational skills that we don't always see being passed down for home gardens. And that's something that we want to address in the educational component of this project as well. However, unfortunately, you kind of have to pick certain topics when looking at a project like this. So I don't know if we're going to have time to interview any home gardeners, but on the consumer side of things, that's definitely something that we will look at embedding questions like that into the consumer surveys as well. Elizabeth Cox has said, local food is often much more expensive than what is available in grocery stores and can become an elitist food source. Are there some ways we might mitigate both the cost and culture around local food and make it more accessible to low-income community members? That's a fantastic question. I'm going to pass that over to any panelist that wants to take it. I think it can hit on different things that you've all talked about. Is there anybody that wants to get a jump on it, or should I pick a name?
I could throw in a little bit. Yeah, one of the challenges there is we don't have the economies of scale in a lot of ways for some of these things. Transportation is one of them. Processing is often that way. I'm pretty sure we're paying quite a bit more for processing of our products than would happen in a larger plant. That's a challenge, I guess, to be overcome. But again, I think as we grow these things and make that infrastructure or help that infrastructure come along in various ways, it is going to help that. Actually, I guess I could add to that too. Just we're always learning better ways of production too, and also as we're able to grow, like say, just grow the size of our enterprise and become larger, we're going to realize some of those economies of scale, I think, and that's going to help with the overhead.
Yeah. Al or Marty, did you have anything to add to that? If not, I'll go on to the next question. So thinking about how this project or similar projects might be relevant across other rural communities in Ontario, do you see value in coordinating similar initiatives across the province? If so, which stakeholders would be involved? Al, do you maybe want to speak to this one?
I can try. I'm not sure I have a lot to add to that, Grace. I think this project is actually a really good example of how that. So there's real potential for sort of translating this particular project to other communities. I think each community will build it in its own way in terms of local food, responding to local conditions. So obviously different geographical areas have different types of geographical resources, and they have different types of challenges and opportunities. But I think this type of project about really starting and establishing a baseline set of data, who's there, who's doing what, and beginning to grow and build that network is a really good sort of first start. So I really commend both Gateway and Libro on this project of providing a method if you like, that other communities could utilize to develop their own local food systems.
Grace, I can chime in as well. When we look at different groups when they come to us for funding, one thing we do look at is how can these projects benefit not just where they're located, but the broader Southwestern Ontario community. So I work in the Huron-Perth region. There are other regions within Southwestern Ontario where Libro operates. So one of the real appealing things about this project was what can we learn and how can we connect people from Essex County, Haldimand, Norfolk, Middlesex County, Chatham, Kent, connect people that other regional managers know in those areas with Gateway, and definitely look to learn from each other.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Sam, did you want to maybe touch on Carolyn's question there?
Yeah, so the next two questions in the Q&A here, one's from Carolyn, which says there has been research and work done regarding local food being incorporated as part of menus in long-term care facilities via the GH Food and Farming Alliance, as well as University of Guelph. And they have found that local food can often be included at no extra cost to these facilities. Do you see long-term care or municipal local food procurement as a future research area? And then also we have a question from Regan Zink, which says the second question, were Indigenous food systems considered as part of this project? So I think I'll just touch on both of these a little bit because I think they are focusing more on the project side of things. And I think that they're both excellent questions, and something that is so exciting about this project is that we really do see it as sort of a stepping stone or a platform for other projects to take off from. So what we are hoping to do here is really get that foundational base that we need to elaborate into more, specific areas such as long-term care, such as Indigenous food systems. So those weren't things that we've looked at specifically with this project, but they are absolutely both fantastic areas of future research that we hope to see things spurred in those areas as well. Did any of the panelists have something that they maybe want to touch on those questions, or we can move on to the next as well? Okay, perfect. So we just got another question that came in here from Sandra, which says, seeing empty shelves in the cereal aisle in grocery stores, isn't there a need to process local grain into local cereals? We'll answer that one live as well. So yeah, Sandra, I think that really highlights what we were mentioning about the supply chain of things. Any panelists want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, I would have to think that that type of processing would be an opportunity. I don't know too much about that specifically, but we've seen it with wineries and breweries. The commodities are here, the market's here. There's no reason, theoretically, that more of that can't be kept local, that process.
Absolutely. I think that it's definitely, like you said, John, something that is worth looking into. I think that there's often a large upfront initial investment needed for things like setting up new production facilities, but it's definitely not something that we should stray away from just because of that. I also will mention that one of the things that we've come across in profiling the producers is seeing people who are producing flour locally as well. So I think it's Farm Little outside of Bayfield, and they have begun, having stone milled flour sold out of their market, which is fantastic, and it's sort of a step towards that direction. And then also another thing that I would say is that kind of touches on the point of food patterns and what we view as certain food. So when you say cereal, a lot of people think, like your Kellogg's, your Posts, that sort of brand. But it's also somewhat of a reframing of people's minds when you look at cereals. So for example, places like Homegrown Food Market, when we were talking to them, and I believe that they're in Wingham right now, they were mentioning that they try and carry as diverse of a range of local foods as possible. And sometimes it's not exactly what you'd think of when you think of a cereal, but it still fills that role in terms of a quick, easy breakfast. So it also shifting perspectives is another part that I think touches on that question as well. All right. I think we'll jump into health impacts. That's another thing that we wanted to talk about. I know we're getting a little close to the 1 o'clock mark here. But we mentioned that local food really does intersect between people's health and the environment. John, I was hoping you could maybe touch on the health aspects of what you do, both human health as well as health of the animals, in like the regenerative farming practices that you have, and maybe the differences that you've noticed between pasture-raised meat.
Yeah, there's certainly a connection there between, well, really it goes back to the soil. Healthy soil produces healthy crops and healthy meat, and when you eat healthy food, you have tendency to be healthier. So just really see there a connection between soil health and the produce that's produced, and then the people that are consuming it. And it's really fascinating what's being learned very recently, or really in real time here now, that what all is going on in the soil, the capacity of the soil to produce ultimately healthy food. It's got all the capabilities there, which, yeah, I'm tying together regenerative farming with local food. I think they do kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. So I think it's really intriguing to dive into that, and see that as a benefit of local food. Is the health benefits are definitely there. There's lots of data and research to support that, and I think it's a huge benefit.
Yeah. And Al, I know a lot of your work centers around the topic of food insecurity, and specifically rural food insecurity. Would you maybe be able to speak to some of the health outcomes associated with food insecurity, both for individuals as well as the overall healthcare system?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I think John's making some really good points there. One of the things in dealing with the issues of food insecurity is the way that we try to meet food insecurity, which is through food banks, which actually doesn't always provide a high quality of food. But there are definitely health impacts of food insecurity. So I would argue that we do a really lousy job of meeting the two ends of the life cycle. So Marty, I think it was, mentioned children and the importance of nutrition for children to develop, to learn. And that has long-term consequences too as they move into adulthood if those nutritional needs aren't met. Just to give you an idea, currently in Canada, 1 in 6 children experience food insecurity, or 1.2 million children are going hungry. So as I mentioned, that has a impact on their long-term ability to sort of really fulfill themselves to their potential. The other end of that spectrum is one that has real healthcare and immediate in costs, and that has to do with the senior population. The main driver of food insecurity is finances, and we've seen a rising, escalating poverty rates for seniors. So, the low income in 2000 for seniors was about 4.7% of the population. And by 2017, that's over 12%. And for those who actually live alone, which tends to be a predominantly female population of seniors, over 30% live below the limited income level. It has real implications for the management of chronic disease. So diet is really important to the mitigation strategies or the management strategies around that. If those strategies aren't, or if chronic disease isn't managed well, then they often end up hospitalized. And one of the interesting studies that I found hard to believe, but it made sense, is that 50% of seniors who are admitted to hospital are diagnosed as suffering from malnutrition. So that says a lot, and it has a real impact on these particular populations. Cost-wise, food insecurity costs in 2017, and we've seen food insecurity rise, costs about $2.5 billion to the healthcare system, just as a result of food insecurity. Um, and food insecure households are more likely to develop chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. They're also more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety, and they report back on lower quality of life in terms of a result of security. But when we tackle food insecurity, it has to be done systemically. So we've mentioned a lot of things. We've mentioned labor force. We've mentioned the healthcare system. I think local producers and the networks that are developed can really become creative in thinking about how they can meet some of those needs locally. I don't have any prescriptions, but it's people like John and Marty who are operating on the ground that can really utilize that creativity and imagination to think about how we can actually do things differently. I'll leave it at that, Sam.
That is fantastic. Thank you for speaking to that. It's such an important point to make, and I think you definitely did a good job at bringing it back to local food too, and how investing in that can help reduce the burden in other places. We are coming up to the end of the interview here, and I'm just noticing that people have been active in the chat as well. So I apologize to the people there that were posting their questions. I was only looking in the Q&A. But thank you to Paul Nickel. Big shout out to him. He's been answering some people's questions and also talking about some programs that we have going on in the county, such as school nutrition programs, which are placing a high priority on sourcing local food for their snack program. So that's fantastic to see. I think it really speaks to getting youth involved in local food as well. And just at the bottom, Marguerite Thomas had a question about connecting people, having more garden than they can handle, and advertising gardener partners on bulletin boards. No one's coming forward. If they know somebody, let them know. And one thing that I will just say, Nancy Simpson, who actually did the introductions for this, let me know about a website called FarmLink, which is set up to link potential farmers with people who have land. So Marguerite, that may be a website that you could check out. It's called FarmLink. I believe it's a .com, but if you Google FarmLink, it should come up. And are there any connections to local food and hospitals? I was in both Owen Sound and Stratford last year, and the food was appalling, unpalatable, and nasty. Al, do you have any information on that?
Some hospitals are procuring local food. I agree that most of the food services in hospitals and a lot of long-term care is contracted out, and the food's absolutely terrible. And food is really important. So here you have economic efficiency really over trumping health and well-being. And so, yeah, I would agree that for the most part, hospital food. The hospital here in Ingersoll, we actually prepare our own food, and actually, it is pretty good. And we also have a tunnel between the hospital and the nursing home, in which we also make the food for the long-term care facility, and it's run over through an underground tunnel. So there are hospitals that are doing, but the issue of local procurement of local foods, I think really offers potential to contribute to the health of people who are in these institutions. So yeah, I agree that food's mostly horrendous.
Hopefully moving forward, we can strengthen local food systems and begin to see more projects like that where we're reaching as many populations as possible. All right, so we've reached 1 o'clock. So that is going to wrap up the lecture for today. I thank all the panelists for agreeing to participate and sharing their perspectives. I'd also like to thank Gateway and Libro for sponsoring the project that we're here to talk about, and all the attendees rather, that joined us today to learn a little bit more, whether it's live or you're watching this as a recording. I thank you. And if nobody has anything else to say, I think we're good to wrap up, but I might let Nancy Simpson close it out.
That's great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Grace and Sam, for explaining this important research project and creating the conversation surrounding the topic of Huron County's food landscape. It's obvious with the attendees' participation. Thanks for all your comments and questions in chat and Q&A. It's a really important topic. The goals of this particular project are many. We want to promote producers who grow and raise local food, increase the number of people who consume the local food, ensure accessible local food, and ultimately grow prosperity by strengthening Huron County's local food systems. The acronym G.R.E.A.T sums it up so nicely: growing, raising, eating, accessible, and thriving. Thank you to panelists Al, Marty, and John for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. We appreciate your support of Gateway and your insight into the outcomes of the research project, such as prosperity, rural food security, and positive health impacts. Thanks to Jay McFarlane of Gateway for his tech support during these lecture series sessions. And a big thank you to our sponsors for their continued support. Without them, the lecture series would not be possible. They include Libro Credit Union, CIBC Private Wealth Management, the Jagger Town Square IDA Pharmacy in Goderich, CERH Goderich, and the Town of Goderich. Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health is a not-for-profit organization with charitable status, and we greatly appreciate and welcome the funding support we receive. If you would like to donate to Gateway to support in support of this lecture series or other activities that Gateway undertakes, please visit our website, gatewayruralhealth.ca, and click on the donate button. And while you're there, please feel free to check out past recordings of other lecture series. Thank you again to all the attendees for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next lecture series session entitled The Cost of Caring on Tuesday, June 7th. Gateway Research Associate Cassandra Bryant will be discussing the preliminary findings from the Rural Healthcare Workers Study, including highlights from the Be Well, Work Well study, specifically relating to the healthcare worker sector. Please pass along the lecture series information to your networks. We really hope to expand the reach of this lecture series with the aim of promoting the knowledge economy, reducing socialization, and supporting Gateway's mission of improving the health and quality of life of rural residents. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.